I said Nalanda's historic and spiritual and religious significance, a place which is not only blessed by the Naga worship, Nagas, Nagananda, but also a place which is inhabited or frequented by philosophers such as Buddha and Mahavira and others. So Nalanda became a center for universal learning. So when you look at uh, the books carried by Xuanzang in 7th century to China, you find that he only carries a number of Buddhist texts. The other texts are of Sanskrit grammar, of various disciplines, medicine and so on, logic. And so on. So Nalanda had a secular curriculum in the sense that it had a universal curriculum. Everything was taught there, which was available. So, and that's the diverse tradition where you find Aryabhat, teaching mathematics, being the first mathematician to use zero as a digit.
Hello and welcome to Culture Vibes, the Federal's special program in which we talk to writers and artists about their work. Our special guest today is poet, diplomat, Abhay K. He is, of course, also a translator and an anthologist and an artist recently who had a show in Delhi. Abhay, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thank you, Anjum, for having me. It's such a pleasure.
So Abhay is
Yeah.
also currently serving as the Deputy Director General of Indian Council of Cultural Relations in Delhi. And we'll be talking about his new book. It's called Nalanda, How It Changed the World. And it has been published by Penguin Random House India. Was Nalanda's rise a result of its surroundings? Or
Mhm.
could another monastery have taken its place under maybe different
Mhm.
circumstances?
Mhm. Well, that's one of the reasons for Nalanda's great prominence, because it was very closely located to both Rajgarh and later to close to Patliputra, which was also the capital of Magad Empire for a long time. Uh, Actually, during the whole duration, you can say almost 70 to 80% of the time of existence of Nalanda. So Rajgarh was the first capital, which was a favorite place of Buddha, and where he met the two of his key disciples, Sariputra and Modgalyayana, both hailed from Nalanda. And initially, Nalanda was a suburb of Rajgir, and Rajgir, being the capital city, was the a place to be in. It was sort of New York of that time. So everybody came. Buddha himself came before he gained enlightenment, and after he gained enlightenment, he did his sermons at Sarnath and then came to Rajgarh. And in Rajgarh, it was in Rajgarh that he met these two, Sariputra and Moglayana, who became his disciples. So Rajgarh was an economic center, Rajgarh, and this is the reason probably that Nalanda, which was very close to Rajgarh, but also the birthplace of Sariputra, around which the whole Nalanda University or Nalanda Mahavihara uh, is built. So Sariputra's, temple number 3, which is the highest structure at the site of the ruins of Nalanda Mahavihara today. That's the Sariputra's stupa, and it has been built over 7 successive phases. Across more than 1,000 years of construction is there. So the first stupa was built by Samrat Ashoka, who lived in Patliputra. His capital was Patliputra, as we know. And but he built this stupa in 3rd century BC for Sariputra at Nalanda, and around which the university grew. So this is the location of Nalanda, not only close to Rajgarh, but also very close to Patliputra. And the place, being blessed by a Naga, that Magad area has a very has a culture of, or had a culture of, serpent worship. So one of the key traditions is to worship the serpent. And there is also, early Buddhism. You have the worship of the serpent and the tree, and so Nalanda was a place which was blessed by a Naga. So it was actually Nagananda, and
Okay.
that's what how the legend grew. That Nalanda was also name of a Naga who used to live in a pond full of lotus and full of mango groves, surrounded by mango groves, which was also a favorite place of Buddha. He often went there to give his sermons. Mahavira went there, and other Shramanas, other philosophers stayed in Nalanda. So, place itself was very historically and spiritually important, and and it was actually Sariputra's birthplace. The second reason was, of Nalanda's rise was its location in the fertile plains of Magad. So that area, where Nalanda is located, is a very fertile land actually, and you have lots of ponds around the site of the ancient Mahavihara. And monks, they require a continuous supply of food and clothes, etc. And they are not producers, they are not farmers. So they depend on the food produced by somebody else. And that area could have supported, even 10,000 monks during during its peak. So, so that was also a factor in mind. Uh, and of course, Nalanda's, as I said, Nalanda's, historic and spiritual and religious uh, significance. A place which is not
Hmm.
only blessed by the Naga worship, Nagas, Nagananda, but
Hmm.
also a place which is, uh, you know, uh, uh, inhabited or frequented by philosophers such as Buddha and Mahavira and others.
You write that across the centuries it was a center that received patronage from different empires, from the Guptas to the Palas, and of course there was Emperor Ashoka himself. So was this royal patronage purely an act of religious devotion, or did rulers see Nalanda as an instrument of political or cultural influence? Also, this what were the benefits, both tangible and symbolic, of aligning with a prestigious center of learning like
Mm.
Buddhist learning?
Well, so see, the Vihara was founded by Ashoka himself, who was
Hmm.
along with the stupa of Sariputra in third century BC, founded a Vihara, not of concrete, but of perishable materials those times. But later on, Nagarjuna is considered to be the first philosopher who
Hmm.
is associated with Nalanda, and his philosophy Madhyamaka or Shunyata was taught at Nalanda, mainly Madhyamaka. And later on, in 5th century AD, or 5th century Common Era, you can say, Sakraditya or Kumar Gupta I, who is a imperial Gupta ruler, is credited with establishing the first concrete monastery there. Now, Guptas were mainly Hindus, Gupta rulers, though there were no such boundaries, emperors of the same dynasty, they used to choose different paths, religious paths or spiritual paths. So, for example, uh, the Ashoka was a Buddhist. He turned into a Buddhist, but his father Bindusar was a Jain, and among the Guptas, the you know uh, Guptas were mainly Hindus, but some of the Guptas had affinities to Buddhism. So Nalanda, by the time of the Guptas, Nalanda is credited to be founded by the Guptas, who were the Hindus. But so the main, I think, the goal of founding Nalanda was to have a great center for excellence in Magad, because to uh, for to build an empire, you need trained people. You need people who are well versed not only in Buddhism or Hinduism, but you need people who are well versed in finance, in mathematics, in medicine, in various areas. So Nalanda became a center for universal learning. So when you look at uh, the books carried by Swen Sang in 7th century to
Yes.
China, you find that he only carries a number of Buddhist texts. The other texts are of Sanskrit grammar, of uh, various disciplines, medicine and so on, logic. And and so on. So Nalanda had a secular curriculum in the sense that it had a universal curriculum. Everything was taught there, which was available. So, and that's the diverse tradition where you find Aryabhat, teaching mathematics, being the first mathematician to use zero as a digit.
Zero as a
So,
digit.
so it was mainly to have not only the religious, teaching of Buddhism, but Guptas saw it as a potential place where the trained mind could come out.
Hmm.
From where trained mind.
Right, right. And you were talking about Sariputra and Modaglana, and they were, of course, as you mentioned, Buddha's closest disciples and earliest,
Mhm.
perhaps. And how do you see the sort of intellectual legacy shaping the contours of what Nalanda eventually became?
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
I
So,
mean,
see, Sariputra and Mogliana were like they are the two uh, uh, key disciples of Buddha. So, what happened when Buddha came to Rajgraha after his enlightenment? Uh, he was someone who was looking for more people to join him, and it was Sariputra who was disciple of another philosophers. So there
hmm,
was six philosophers active in Rajgrah that time who were competing against each other to get more followers.
hmm,
So Sariputra was and Madhyayana both were disciples of Sanjaya Belatiputta or Belati Putra, we can say. So,
hmm,
and when they heard, the preachings of Buddha, what he was, there's a famous Ye Dharma Hetu, which
hmm,
is that which is Buddha's Pratitya Samutpad, that everything has a cause. And everything, therefore, originates because of a cause, and therefore everything can end with a whatever originates ends. So, so, and his four noble truths come from that. That because there's a suffering, and there's a cause to suffering, and there is an end to suffering, right? And then there's a four path to eightfold path to end of this suffering.
right,
So that comes from his theory of pratitya samutpad, that everything is dependently originated. And when they heard this, they Sariputra, along with 500 followers of Sanjaya Belatiputta, went to Buddha at Venuvan and joined him. So this was, and he was taken as the chief, Buddha's first chief male disciple, and
hmm,
Modglina was the second chief male disciple. So
okay,
and Sariputta is also known as Dharma Senapati, or
hmm,
the general of the Dharma for Buddhism. So he both of them, they played crucial roles in the advancement of Buddhism.
why do you think Nalanda is not being acknowledged as a major sort of birthplace of modern scientific thought?
Mhm. I think it's because of the lack of knowledge and historical amnesia. Because most of us have not. I am from Nalanda, and in Nalanda nobody really knows about any of the great masters of Nalanda. I had to dig deep into books and published materials to find even the short biographies of the great masters of Nalanda. They have been completely forgotten. What a tragedy! While they are remembered in other parts of the world, they are alive in the Tibetan chronicles. They are alive in China and in Korea and Japan and whole of Southeast Asia. People know them. I learned about the great Dharmakirti from Octavio Paz actually when I was reading his book In Light of India.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And I came across Dharmakirti that he was the head of Nalanda University at one point of time, and and his poem. So I learned about him through poetry, and uh, but in Nalanda nobody knows Dharmakirti. They have been completely forgotten. So. So that's the tragedy, and this historical amnesia. Because what happened probably because of colonization, that we lost our self confidence, we
Right.
lost this belief even that we were capable of great things. So
Mm.
nobody teaches, even in the West, the Indian numbers which are widely used there are known as Arabic numerals, not
Mm.
Indian numbers.
Yeah.
It took a William Dalrymple to establish that you are not, please get to know Aryabhatta and Brahmagupta, whose numbers you are using, and whose
Yeah.
algebra and algorithms you are using.
Algorithms. Yes.
So William tells about this journey in a great detail, how the Indian numbers moved,
Mm.
from India, from Magad, third century BCE, to Arab world, first through translations of the works of Brahmagupta as Sindh Hind, and from there through great Fibonacci to Europe. And
Right.
so that's one of the stories. But there are materials available, but I mean, we also find it hard to believe that, oh really, is it so? But historically, that's the historical fact.
Hmm. 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 And one of its many influences, of course, was also the architecture. And you write that it is something that influenced the architecture of modern universities like Oxford and
Mhm.
Cambridge. And but of course, this was not something that was limited to one field only. It was something
Mhm.
that spread across science, mathematics. You
Mhm.
had architecture. So.
Mhm.
How much of what we call a university today actually comes from Nalanda?
Well, see, the idea of a university actually comes from Nalanda, and this I have given enough evidence in the book to prove that. And see, what is a university today? A modern university requires a campus with which has its own campus, which has international faculty and international students and universal subjects. What is universal subjects? Where you are not teaching just one subject or two subjects, but you are teaching everything. You are teaching grammar, you are teaching languages, you are teaching logic, you are teaching art, medicine, poetry. You are teaching, of course, the philosophy, both Mahayana and Yogacara philosophy. These were the two main philosophies taught at Nalanda for at least 800 years.
Hmm.
Which evolved into Vajrayana later. So,
Hmm.
uh, so, so, so that's where you have to go and see the ruins of Nalanda, how massive they are, even after 700 years of their uh, lapsing into neglect and being buried underground. Look at their walls; they're massive. So imagine how large the university campus would be. So
Hmm.
and the second thing that even today, if you look at the Oxford website, they say that the quads and courts of Oxford are inspired by the monastic establishments, and uh, uh, so this one, there's a book called Warriors of the Cloisters, and Christopher Bakewith, he tries to prove that how the modern colleges in Europe are actually madrasas, uh, and uh, and madrasas are nothing but the Buddhist viharas, uh, which were emulated into madrasas. So this he proves till Central Asia, and I extend it further from Central Asia to Nalanda, that
Hmm.
actually the standard plan of a the plan of architecture, the courtyard and the rooms, the cloisters around the courtyard are actually standardized at Nalanda. So there were obviously earlier places like Taxila and other places where this kind of structures are found, but they are not standardized. And
Right.
the standardization takes place in the Mauryan period,
Hmm.
and travels from there to other places, and then Nalanda becomes the massive campus, where you have the row of viharas, not only one row but several rows of viharas, as Swen Sang mentioned in his book. uh, uh, you know and You have a well-led architectural plan. And see, all the universities need funds, they need patronage. And you have patronage from the imperial Guptas. You have
Yes.
universal faculty, coming from not only from the whole of India, but also
Hmm.
from other places. You have inscriptions found in Nalanda where the king of Sumatra is asking the Pala king to build a monastery for the monks from Sumatra, and dedicate 5 villages for them, so that through his ambassador Bala Burman. So these are historic facts. So that's how I feel that the Nalanda journey from Vihara to Mahavihara. It began
Yeah.
as a Vihara, small Vihara in third century BC, but it
Hmm.
turned into a Mahavihara by the fifth century AD. So that's the journey where the idea of a university was born.
I'm just curious to know what made Nalanda so intellectually fertile in a way, and was it it's just its sheer diversity of students, or perhaps the depth of its curriculum that was so distinct, or something
Mhm.
about its teaching methods that sort of
Mhm.
allowed new ideas to flourish at a time like that?
Well, I think it was the teaching method, because Nalanda was known for its debates and discussions. So anybody was free to come to Nalanda, and first of all, the person who came met the Dwarpala Pandit, who engaged him in discussion, and and assessed his ability to discuss. It was not his knowledge, what he has learned so far, but it was his ability to explore, to argument, what we call as the discursive argument method, question after question. So I think that was the key way to teach at Nalanda, where you allowed everyone to question, and question freely. So that uh, there was no there was no restriction on questioning. So I think that was which was I think very unique to Nalanda, and that itself led to the evolution of these great philosophies like Madhyamaka philosophy, where
Mm,
Nagarjuna himself says that there are two realities.
mm,
There's a conditional reality and there's an absolute reality, which is sunyata, or emptiness of independent existence. So that's even diversity of truths, in the sense that there is no one truth. There are two truths.
mm,
So
mm.
so that itself, the acceptance of this diversity, the
Right.
universalism, that Nalanda, there were 18 sects of Buddhism that time, and Swansang mentioned that all the 18 sects were taught at Nalanda,
Mm, mm,
including Hinayana. Nalanda was a Mahayana Buddhist center, because Nagarjuna is a Mahayanist, but uh, uh, but Hinayana and other 18 sects, including other sects, were taught at Nalanda. Not only that, they mentioned that they also teach Vedas, and they they say they teach grammar and logic, and other disciplines, art and mathematics, whatever is astronomy.
Let's talk a little bit about its decline. Of course, it's very well known that the burning of Nalanda's library, for instance,
Mhm,
that after Bakhtiyar Khilji's invasion, and that's often described as the greatest intellectual sort of tragedies of history.
mhm,
And I wanted to ask you that what did we lose with the destruction of Nalanda? And before,
mhm,
of course, later the revivalism began, and you
mhm,
write that it continued to spread its
mhm,
footprints world
mhm,
over, and there were attempts by the Indian government throughout the decades to restore it to its previous glory. But if you could talk about, what did this loss mean, and what does this revivalism also mean?
So, well, I mean, there's a difference between the decline and destruction of Nalanda, and the decline was happening over a long period of time, because even if you read the accounts of Xuan Sang, the Chinese traveler, Buddhism was in decline in many parts of north west of India, and it was actually in the central India uh, and in Magad that Buddhism was flourishing during his time. So since the beginning, there has been, since the time of Nagarjuna itself, there has been a and even actually during the time of Buddha, between the epistemology and philosophy of Buddhism and Puranic Brahmanism, they have been at classing each other. And so there were, but Nalanda was open to debates, and there were several debates between the philosophers of these two streams, and depending on the who wins the debate, that decided the patronage and so on. So by the when the Pala rulers, the last rulers who sort of were major patrons of Buddhism, when the Pala rule declined because of the internal conflicts within North and Northeast India and Central India, there were no major patronage to Buddhism. Patronage shifted to Brahmanical, Puranic Brahmanism, Brahmanical philosophies and deities, and so there was a shift in also the Tantric Buddhism or Vajrayana. By the end of its journey, it started resembling the Nath Sampradaya, which is considered a bridge between both Buddhism, Tantric Buddhism, and Shaivism, like Baba Goraknath and Matsyendranath. They are the links, between the two. So it became almost indistinguishable. But what happened politically and economically, that by the 12th century, the central and North India were in a in a space which had a political vacuum. There were no central authority controlling their areas. There were smaller rulers here and there, and that led to the invasions, from the northwest of India. And Bakhtiyar Khilji, he was merely a plunderer. His main goal was to loot all these rich monasteries, Buddhist monasteries, including in Magad. But mainly he was interested in the monasteries of Tibet, and wanted to control the routes, of trade of horses from Tibet to India. So it was with this motive that he attacked these monasteries. And there's a reference by Minhaj, Persian historian, of destruction and looting and killing of and burning of the books at the Udantapuri monastery, which is now Bihar Sharif. And there's a very graphic detail of that, which Minhaj has written. And he has written, quoting the two raiders, two soldiers who participated with him in this raid, when he met them in another place in Bengal, and many more years later, because there's a time gap, of many decades between the actual event and the happening. And now there's no, I mean, I have not come across any source which tells that Bakhtiyar Khalji went to Nalanda. But Nalanda is located just 15 kilometers away from Udantapuri or Bihar Sharif, and Nalanda being the most rich and the famous monastery, uh, nobody in common sense would believe that it would be spared. So if Minhaj did not meet these, people who participated in the raids, that's a gap in historiography. But I mean, there are many other Buddhist monasteries which are raided by him, which includes the monastery of Telhara and other monasteries of Magad. So the motive and the intention itself, gives credible evidence that Nalanda was ransacked, looted. But Nalanda, you have to go and see it. It is too large to be destroyed in one or two raids. Nalanda was attacked and destroyed earlier as well. For example, there's an evidence that Shashanka, the king of Bengal, attacked Nalanda. But
Okay.
there were always people who rebuilt it, who patronized and who give money and rebuilt the university. But now there is nobody
Definitely.
to build, because there's a political and economic vacuum in North India.
Right.
But Nalanda does not die. You have the founding of a Fenpo Nalendra, as Nalanda is known as in Tibet, Nalendra, in Tibet, in 16th century, and this monastery, emulates Nalanda. It's like a new Nalanda in Tibet, and
Right.
and so on. So Nalanda, the idea of Nalanda survives, and
Still is.
Nalanda gets founded in other places.
Right. One last question, Abhay, and that is about the fact that history, of course, has been weaponized in recent years, and I was just curious that it is Nalanda, the story of Nalanda tells something about India's intellectual past in a way, and what could we reclaim, perhaps, not just as a point of pride, but perhaps as a way to rethink knowledge, maybe education, intercultural exchange in the times that we live in. Could you talk a little bit about that as well, and then rewind?
Mhm. Well, so see what happened, that the idea of Nalanda somehow got lost for a while in within India, but not in other places, because Nalanda was ever present in China and in Tibet. I mean, there's so many monuments in different places, like the library, the Sutra library in Xi'an, for example, in China, which is built like a bit like the Chatya of Sariputra,
Right.
in the Panchayatana style, to host the sutras which were brought by Xuanzang to China. Tibet, there was Fenpo Nalendra, and so on. So Nalanda lived. The books were taken by, many of the manuscripts were taken from Nalanda by the monks, who fled the university, and they took it to different parts of the world. And you can find some of these sutras at National Museum in Delhi and other places in the world. So Nalanda stood for knowledge, it stood for creation of knowledge and sharing of knowledge. Because in Nalanda, anybody could come and copy the sutras and take them back. So today, I mean, modern times, there are efforts to revive Nalanda, and first one was Nalanda Mahavihara, which was founded uh, uh, just after India's independence, and none other than our own Dr. Rajendra Prasad, the first president of India, in
Right.
1951. Nalanda Mahavihara was founded, which goal was to emulate Nalanda Mahavihara in terms of Buddhist teachings mainly, but also have you know, other teachings.
Mm.
Mm, and then, there was this several attempts, like Magad Institute of Postgraduate Studies and Research in Pali and Allied Languages,
Mhm.
uh, which later became Nalanda Mahavihara. And then you also have this uh, Open University. Nalanda Open University was founded by the government in 1987,
Right.
to revive the. And it was in 2000, actually 6, that Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam proposed the idea of establishing Nalanda University at the Bihar Assembly. And later on in 2010, an act of parliament was passed to create Nalanda University, which was inaugurated, I mean, which started functioning from 2014, September 2014. And the new campus was the construction of a new campus, which is a very beautiful campus in Rajgir, started in 2017, and it was inaugurated last year, 2024, by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So that's how but this is Indian story. There are institutes named after Nalanda now across the globe, and
Yeah,
this has been happening since quite some time. Uh, uh, I mean, I have come across institutes named after Nalanda in Toulouse, France, and in Canada, in in Brazil, in Australia, in Malaysia, Singapore, and probably there are many more Nalandas across the globe, which I think needs deeper research.
right.
So the
No,
idea of Nalanda never died in a way, and I think the new university, Nalanda University, which is a net zero campus, and
right.
gives us some hope that the Nalanda's continuity and resurgence within India and abroad, is a truly a matter of great hope for me.
Right. On that note, Abhay, thank you so much. It was really insightful and informative. And talking of, its footprint, of course, I mean, as you mentioned, it remains everywhere pretty much around the globe. And also, for those of you watching the show, Abhay has also, in the end notes, provided a comprehensive list of bibliography of books. So those of you who are interested in the story of Nalanda can go check out, buy the book, read the book, of course, get fascinated by the story of Nalanda, by the intellectual sort of treasure that it had at a time. And it is a treasure that continues to sort of inform so many realms of our lives in so many different ways, visibly, invisibly. So thank you so much, Abhay. It was really fascinating talking to
Thank you, Navaid, for these stimulating questions, which gave me the opportunity to share more information about Nalanda. Thank you for having me.